Techniques of speech and thought presentation. This unit explores techniques of speech and thought presentation in narrative fiction. It integrates narrational viewpoint and character perspective, focusing on both indirect and direct method such as free indirect discourse and free direct mode. The final subunit offers a short commentary on the connections between point of view and speech and thought presentation. So, in this unit, it explores into how author presents characters, thought, and speech in stories. We learn about different ways writers can do this, like showing a character's thought indirectly or directly. We'll also see how these techniques connect to with who's telling and whose perspective we are seeing. So it's all about understanding how writers use language to let us into their characters' mind and voices. Indirect discourse presentation. It involves techniques that shift the narrative focuses towards a particular character's perspective away from the basic narrative structure. So, here, so, di ba, when you're reading a story and it feels like you're right there with the characters, like, nafe-feel yun din yung kung ano yung nangyayari sa stories. So, that's the basic narrative structure. But sometimes the author wants us to focus more on what a specific character is thinking or saying. And that's the indirect discourse presentations comes in. So just like me, when I'm reading a story, Wattpad stories, sometimes, diba, umiiyak, natatawa, or pag like when you're reading, parang ako mismo, ako yung character, like, kung ano yung nangisip ng character, parang andun niya ako sa mismong sitwasyon. So, like when it focuses on just one character and you hear their thoughts or what they are saying instead of just seeing everything that happens in a story. The external narrative structure, known as the narrator's representation of action or NRA, encompasses all non-speech and non-thoughts phenomena in fiction world. The transitions into a character speech and non-thought phenomena in the fictional world. The transition into a character speech or thought can range from minimal reporting to detailed description. So the NRA, or representation of action, so this basically means all the steps that not speech or thought in the story. So this is like the background action. When we switch to a character's speech and thoughts, it can be done in different ways. Sometimes it's just a quick summary or of what they said or thought, and other times the author goes into a detail about it. Next is the narrative report of speech or thought. So marks this first step away from NRA, summarizing reported speech or thought while serving other narrative functions as well. So think that the narrative report as a window into character's mind. It's when you read Bob thought about his move, it's like you are picking in both thoughts, gaining a deeper understanding of his emotions and feelings. It's a tool writers use to add layers to their characters and make the story more engaging. Narrative report of speech, or NRS, mode both as a mechanism for compressing a sequence of extended dialogue and as an ironizing device to critique degrades personages with characteristically false modesty. Fielding's narrator politely demurs from transcribing, such as reputedly fine talk, thereby portraying a rid of effete the conversation of assembled societies. Of all the categories of the speech and thought framework, there is one mode that has come under particular scrutiny from a stylistic perspective. So, the author uses a clever way to summarize long conversation and make fun of important people instead of directly quoting their supposedly impressive speech fielding's narrator politely to avoid it, showing that the conversation of these high-class people are actually boring. So this technique is called NRS, and its help fielding criticize how shallow some society's interactions can be. Among all the ways authors write speech and the thoughts, this one NRS is especially interesting to study for its style. This passage discusses free indirect discourse or FID, which include both speech and thought. It's a narrative technique used in various ways and known by different names like Erlib read and style indirect livre. Stylists are interested in how it creates the impression of both character and narrator speaking at once. Often, they refer to as a dual voice. Unlike direct speech, the FID lacks reporting clauses and quotation marks but retains the features of indirectness. So, free indirect, both speech and thought, is important because it's used in many different ways and has a various names. Also, what's interesting here is that how it makes it seems like both character and narrator are talking at the same time, like having two voices in one. Unlike the direct speech in FID, there is no reporting clauses or quotation marks. So let's look at the example from Malcolm Lowry's book Under the Volcano, where Laurel is in Japan thinking about his future in and then suddenly switches to thinking about the weather. Direct discourse presentation and free direct modes of speech and thought presentation have a very different kind of stylistic currency compared to their counterparts in the free indirect modes. For example, pre-direct thought or FDT is the mainstay of the so-called stream of consciousness technique of prose writing. This technique involves supplementing FDT with a type of grammatical abbreviation known as ellipsis to produce a fast-paced flow of sometimes fragmentary or partial thoughts as they enter the consciousness of character or narrator. So, the direct discourse presentation or especially free indirect thought or FDT is a stylistic technique in writing that differs from free the indirect modes. This is commonly used in the stream of consciousness method or of prose writing. This technique involves showing the thoughts of characters or narrators directly, often using the ellipses to shorter the sentences and create a rapid flow of partial thoughts, giving readers insight into the character's mind. It's like taking a peek into someone's thoughts as they occur without any filtering or interpretation by the narrator. The stream of consciousness technique, chapter 10, delves into its cognitive impact on the style. It's noted that the more free and direct presentation of speech or thought, the less control the narrator has overcome the content. This allows characters to express themselves seemingly without mediation. In speech presentation, redirect speech is the freest form characterized by the absence of reporting clauses or inverted commas. In prose writing, free direct speech serves as to create an impression of unfiltered, natural dialogue between characters. An example from Ian McEwan's Amsterdam Illustrated is involving newspaper editor Vernon Halliday encountering a queue of sub-editor and secretaries upon his slave arrival to the office. So in here, the stream of consciousness technique affects writing style by looking at how our brains work. When character speech or thoughts are shown more directly and freely, it means the narrator has less control over what's being said. These let the characters express themselves as if there's no one filtering their thoughts of words from free direct speech or thought. Direct speech is the most restricted form where there aren't any reporting clauses or quotation marks. In stories, this technique helps make dialogue between characters feel real and spontaneous. For instance, in Mac Evans, there's a scene in Amsterdam where Vernon Halliday arrives late to his work and encounters a group of people waiting for him, showing a how free direct speech makes dialogue feel natural and unfiltered. Character viewpoint and speech and thought presentation. In character viewpoint and speech and thought presentation, we typically experience events from the perspective of the character whose speech or thought are being represented. However, it's possible to be within a character's viewpoint without explicitly using formal modes of speech and thought presentation. Just like for instance, in Mac Evans Amsterdam, the passage examined in a previous section anchors spatial viewpoint within a character's perspective initially, then transitions to relaying the character's active and self-conscious thoughts through free indirect thought later in the passage. So here, so just like when we read stories, we often see events from the viewpoint of the characters whose thoughts or speech are shown, but sometimes even without directly stating the character's thought, we can still be inside their viewpoint. For example, just given here of the McEvans Amsterdam, the passage initially describes the surroundings from a character's thought are shared without explicitly stating them through something called free indirect thought. This technique let us experience the character's inner reflections and feelings even though it's not directly stated as their thought. So, para di kayo malito, yung direct speech involves presenting characters' words exactly as they are spoken, often enclosed in quotation mark. Then the indirect speech is the narrator summarizes or paraphrase what a character said rather than quoting them directly. Then the free indirect speech, so here it blends the narrator's voices with the character's thoughts, creating narrative that reflects both perspective. And lastly, the free indirect speech, here it represent characters thought or speech without the clauses, allowing readers to experience the character's thought directly. So overall, this technique of speech and thought presentation is connected to the stylistics, which this study of how language is used to convey meaning and create specific effects in literature. So these techniques plays a crucial role in shaping the style of a text and influencing how readers interpret and engage with the narrative. By studying how authors use speech and thought presentation techniques, stylistic analyzes how these choices contribute to the overall communication goals of a literary works.